All right, we did it. So, as I was coming on here, this is episode 5. We're talking about perfectionism, and I have so many good stories for you today because my tech wasn't working. I have another video camera rolling off to my side, and my perfectionism was kicking in. It was like, oh, the lighting is horrible on this. I shouldn't even record. So, it's just so interesting. So, today I'm going to dive into perfectionism and actual solutions for it. And I'll tell you a few stories too. First of all, though, I want to say thank you for tuning in and listening to the podcast. I actually received an email from someone from last week when I shared that tip about putting my hair outside for the birds. And she emailed me and said, "Hey, don't use human hair. Don't put it out there. It can get wrapped around the bird's legs." And I said, "Absolutely. I hear you." So I did a little more research and I dug into it. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that if we cut up the hair and we'll make sure that the little babies can use our little hairs, because I've seen that hairdressers kind of like put the clippings. We just need to make sure the hair doesn't have any toxins on it. So that is our PSA for the animals and the birds and putting your hair out. So let's talk about. We talked on the last podcast about what perfectionism is, really what it looks like, and how it shows up for you. But I want you to really just tap in on this episode. We're going to be talking about feelings. And yesterday, I taught an in person breathwork session, and my perfectionism was kicking in because I really love aesthetics. So I really love pretty things. I love pink, purple, blue, white. And I grew up as a total tomboy, but as I've become an adult human woman, I really wanted to tap into that feminine energy. So people always see me with like pretty things and I like aesthetics. And so I had the breathwork room set up how I liked it with the candles and our oracle cards and like really soft textures. Like I went and bought white rugs and just like feeling really cozy. And then I started playing on my speakers the music. And what was happening, don't know how, this is the first time this happened on these speakers, but it started crackling, like the Bluetooth was losing its connection because it's like two speakers paired to one another. And then that is paired to my phone, which is operating through other, obviously, Bluetooth and Wi Fi. So I was having like a whole moment of just anxiety and panic as the speakers are like cutting in and out while I'm holding space for these women to have like a breakthrough in their breathwork session. So I just decided it is what it is. It really can't be fixed. I like tried to fix it during session, right? All the ways I could figure out. Long story short, I'm going to buy new speakers. It's time to get new speakers. But it was really a good highlight of how we love to control things. And for me, like I say, I love to control the aesthetic. Like that's my Virgo rising. That's very much like it needs to look this way. It needs to be a certain way. But what was always interesting for me is, and this is something I'll share because I'm feeling for today, I'm also feeling super vulnerable with this because this just happened. A couple other things just happened. And so it really is this vulnerability of not feeling good enough. And so I notice anytime I'm about to go speak or I'm about to go present, like I end up like my anxiety will end up getting hyper focused on the outfit that I'm going to wear or like having the spray tan or having the right handouts, and I'll really like over project on items and making sure that I have the right items. And so just notice where this perfectionism might show up for you, how it might be triggering something of this not feeling good enough. And if I just make it perfect, or if I make it look good enough, if I make my slides the right color, or if it has really good graphics, then I'll be accepted. People will like me, right? And it really is us trying to seek out an internal sense of safety, right? Perfectionism basically says if everything goes perfectly, I will be loved, I will be accepted. Now, the flip side of perfectionism, right? Like, why do we do this? We do this because we want to avoid shame. And I'm going to pull up a quote here from Brene Brown, who has a book called The Gift of Gifts of Imperfection. She also have a TED Talk. Many of you probably know her. She says, and she's a shame researcher. She says, shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. So essentially, this activity of perfectionism, right? It's basically setting a really high standard, sometimes an unrealistic standard. It's getting hung up on tiny little details because we feel like if we can control that, We can control this being loved and being worthy of love and being worthy of money if you're growing a business, right? If I can just have the perfect website, the perfect business card, if I can, for me, it's always like, did I coach my clients well enough? And I'll go through a shame spiral if I feel like I made any mistakes. So, how do we work through this? This is really what I want you to understand is this pattern will always be available for us. So a lot of times when I'm coaching clients, they'll come to me and they'll say, I have a really negative brain. And what I say, well, of course you do, because you're a human and our brain is innately negative. And the reason it's innately negative is because it's looking to keep us safe from environmental things that could actually harm us and then sociological, cultural things that could harm us, right? Because if you think about how we evolve as humans, we evolve very slowly. And if you remember natural selection, right? The way that our genetics would get passed on through environment was those who stayed in community typically stayed safe, and then they would find a mate, and then they would be able to have babies with that mate and pass on their genetics. So what we know is being ostracized, the feeling of being unliked, the feeling of being kicked out of the tribe, it actually feels like death in our body because in ancient times it would equal death because we would be outside the city walls, outside the town gates, we would be off alone in the desert and basically left to perish. So I want you to just know that this feeling of like this intense shame or guilt is something that had to been beneficial for us in the past. But the thing that we need to learn as perfectionists, and this is why I facilitate breath work, this is why I teach EFT tapping, somatic work, hypnosis, emotional processing, is because all we're afraid of is to feel a feeling. And we're trying to control feeling that feeling of fear, anxiety, shame, guilt, disappointment, sadness, failure. We're trying to control that by controlling our environment or our actions. And so the solution really is being able to feel shame in your body. And I know this sounds counterintuitive because you're like, no, that's horrible. Being able to feel anxiety in your body. But here is the thing anxiety is already present, it's present with perfectionism. Shame is already present, it's present with the action of perfectionism. So when we can surrender, when we learn how to process and feel the emotion, when we learn how to hold space, which means when we learn how to love ourselves for the parts of us that want to control, for the parts of us that want to be perfect, for the parts of us that compare and judge. That's part of perfectionism, right? We're always comparing ourselves, trying to be the best in class, trying to be the A plus student. When you can love all those parts of you, you are then free. And I've had my clients say, Cami, you're on a longer journey. You've been doing this longer than me. And I'm like, yeah, I had a lot of self loathing to work through. And it ended up, I was in this relationship for almost 10 years that was demonstrating my self loathing. But here's the thing this doesn't take 10 years to do. I want to give you some simple, practical tools that you can use right now today. And because really getting over this is just a practice. Just like you've practiced these thoughts over and over again over the years, getting over it is also just a practice. So it's just a pattern. Remember, perfectionism is just a pattern. And the way to break through the pattern is to have courage to face the emotions. So the solution to shame here is 3 parts. Part 1 is the willingness to be seen vulnerable. And I'll say this, you do want to have a safe container if you're opening up in a vulnerable way. So the willingness to be seen vulnerable. This is why I teach breath work. Breath work is a beautiful container for you to show up with whatever feelings you're feeling and be able to hold space and have space held for you. Another way to practice vulnerability is to go seek out a qualified professional. So if your mental health is such that you're unable to do things that you really want to do and it's in your below baseline, then you'd want to seek out a therapist and you want to have a vulnerable conversation with a therapist, especially if you're dealing with diagnosable anxiety or depression. But another way to be vulnerable is to book a consult call, to have a conversation with a coach, to say, "Hey, I know that I really love being seen as perfect and having it all together, but here are the places that I really need help and support," and being willing to show up and receive support. Because part of that perfectionism is like isolation, and it feels really lonely. And then you begin to really get into those dark thoughts of not feeling good enough. When you can open yourself up to vulnerability, that also means you're opening yourself up to support. So, step number 2 is opening yourself up to the support in a supportive container. And in that supportive container, you want to learn these things. You want to learn the ability to celebrate and validate yourself. Because part of perfectionism is like winning the award, getting the title, getting the promotion, making the money, like really looking for these external means of validation. And so what we do in coaching is we celebrate every single week. I have my clients celebrate 3 wins. You can start doing this right now. You can even start doing this today where you at the end of the day journal at night. This is what I did well. I'm so proud of myself because of this. You can also journal, here's what I did in the past 10 years, in the past 5 years. Here's where I was, here's where I am now. Allowing yourself to feel proud on purpose. So, step 1, willingness to be seen in a vulnerable, safe container and receive support. Step number 2, ability to celebrate and validate oneself. And you usually learn that through a supportive container, right? And you might say, well, what do you mean? Isn't like the coach or therapist validating me? Yes, and okay. So, what I call this is being witnessed. And I'll always tell my clients, show up to the call with your wins. And then I even had a client come up to the call and say, I know you told me to do this thing, but I decided to do this other thing instead. And I knew, right? Most of my clients will have this trepidation, like this people pleasing energy of like, you better please the teacher, better please the coach, right? Because we're taught that. We're taught that there's a hierarchy. And what I see in coaching, I call it peer to peer coaching, right? I'm just here to say, I know what your goals are. I know what your dreams are. I'm holding you to the standard that you set for yourself. I'm holding you to your values. And especially in your own life, you're the one making the decision. So I always celebrate with my clients when they make decisions for themselves and they're not just doing things because I told them, right? Because we do not want to create another codependent relationship where you're seeking to please someone else versus seeking to please yourself. So in the witnessing of the celebration, you start learning how to celebrate it for yourself. And you're the one that feels the celebration, that feels feeling proud on the inside. You're the one that validates yourself. And I love using the affirmation, I'm doing a good job. I'm doing a good job. I don't even like using the affirmation, I'm doing my best, or as long as I did my best today. There are some days where I feel like I definitely didn't do my best because I have such a high standard and I have this ridiculous expectation that I should perform like a superhuman. But I will just say I'm doing good enough. Like, good enough is good enough. I'm doing a good job. It's good enough. I love myself even though I didn't get as much done as I wanted or I wasted time, like whatever the story is. I love myself. I'm doing a good job. I'm safe. I'm okay. And then step number 3, I alluded to. And this is the one that does take practice because we're not taught this. The reason I entered the life coaching industry was to learn this for myself. And this is called emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is the ability to relate with oneself, to relate with others, to be in relationship, and to be in your emotional state and move through your emotional state. And so really this last piece is developing the capacity to sit with emotions and accept them in order to move through. So I know most of you will say, "What? No, I don't want to accept shame. I don't want to say yes to shame. I don't want to say yes to anxiety." But notice what happens when you try to fight your emotions, you try to push them down. Typically, what will happen is we will seek something out to distract or numb. Those things that we seek, whether it's food, alcohol, drugs, shopping, distraction, scrolling, it's not actually life affirming. It's not actually life giving. So you want to check in with how we really numb and buffer and avoid and block those emotions. And what's really powerful is when you can sit with that emotion and say, I feel you. It makes sense. It's safe for this emotion to be here. I'm safe to feel this. It's just a sensation in my body. And what you can start to do is breathe deeply because we know that regulates the nervous system. But what you can also do is start to tap in, right? Feel into the body and start to sense what's here. And so you might start describing, I feel a tightness in my chest. It feels heavy. And then you can just breathe into that and say, I'm safe. It's okay to be here. This makes sense. And then as the emotion comes up, you want to let it come up, whether you need to cry, scream, kick, punch, whatever it is that you feel like you need to release. And what I like to do, I will do an EFT tapping video later, but if you're listening to the audio, I'm just taking my fingers, I'm tapping about 2 inches above the collarbone. This is one of the meridian tapping points that I find to be most useful. And you might just say, even though I made mistakes, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Even though I'm feeling shame, unworthiness, not good enough, right here and right now, it's safe for me to feel these emotions. Okay, so that's really step one of feeling the emotions and like allowing yourself to feel through it. And then what I like to do is allow that whole thing, right? You feel the emotions, and then I like to get myself to a higher vibrational state, right? Because some of us will just like go into this pit of despair, this pit of shame, and you'll start agreeing with the thoughts in your mind. And so the next thing I'll do after feeling the feelings is I'll go to the journal, right? So this is kind of like a bonus step. I gave you 3 steps to solving shame. Number 1 is the willingness to be seen as vulnerable in a safe container. Number 2, the ability to celebrate and validate yourself. Number 3, to develop the capacity to sit with emotions. And then I offered you one way, which is EFT tapping. Another way is breath work. Another way is somatic processing. Another way is hypnosis. And we do all of these in coaching, and you could seek these out for yourself as well. But to get yourself back into a state of balance, I like to use journaling because journaling is a way to tap into the subconscious. And what you can do after you process the emotion is you can write down a couple of these prompts. What am I proud of myself for? And you can just say in my entire life. Let's go broad. And then you can say, what am I proud of myself for in the past 10 years, past 5 years, past 1 year? What am I proud of myself for today? And allow yourself to move into feeling proud. Another thing that you can consider and ask in your journal as a prompt is, how do I want to feel? And sometimes when we're shifting out of shame and anxiety and fear and the sense of control, we want to shift into willingness, courage, bravery, acceptance. All of these are really valuable emotions to tap into. You don't necessarily need to feel joyful or abundant, like that's a little bit too far of a jump, but we just want to tap into courage and willingness. And so, your willingness to listen to this podcast, to put it into play, to do the journaling process will already shift things for you. I promise you. What I find a lot of times, and Dr. Joe Dispenza, he has a book called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. We love, right? Our energy loves to stay in homeostasis, which means like if we've had these negative thoughts, if we've been a perfectionist our entire life, our brain has a really strong neural pathway that says, yep, let's just keep going down the shame spiral. And sometimes we actually want to stay stuck because we're addicted to the chemicals, the neurotransmitters that have been in our body, and it feels very normal. And so there will be times where it feels like you're digging yourself out of this rut, out of this pattern of really beating yourself up. And you've just got to be onto yourself. You got to be present and use every single tool that's possible for you and really allow yourself to dig in because you're worth it. Doing this work on perfectionism, you are worth it. And it is a worthy cause to dig in to all of the things in your past, to everything that you want in your future, to forgive yourself, to move forward. This is a worthy cause because it's not just for you, it's for whatever you create in the world, the ways that you give back, the things that you create, the connections that you make, the relationships you build. It's also for your children. You're exampling and you're showing them what it's like to be someone who loves themselves deeply. And you're setting a standard of the first and foremost is to be kind, yes, to others, but to be kind to yourself. Because that's going to help you and them learn how to go after their dreams, how to overcome failure, how to overcome fear and anxiety. Because if you learn how to stop beating yourself up, then you can go after anything. And if you fail and you fall down, you'll be gentle with yourself, you'll love yourself, you'll evaluate, you'll get back up, and you'll do it again. So I want you to just know the solution to perfectionism is deep self acceptance. And self acceptance means I'm good enough just as I am. I don't need to lose weight. I don't need more money in my bank account. I don't need to have a different hairstyle, different hair color. I don't need to get Botox. Whatever the thing is that you consistently tell yourself, I am good enough right now. Without changing a thing, I accept myself. And from there, that's when you can create energy to go on a journey of expansion and find out which skills and abilities you want to learn and expand and grow more into. But this truly isn't ever about being your best self or being better or being a better version of you. It is about consciously expanding into more love. That's what this is. That's what life is all about, is more love. So if we can love ourselves in all of our imperfection, we can also love others in all of their imperfection. We can start to accept others. I find a lot of times family and close relationships, coworkers can be challenging, but when we can accept ourselves, we can also learn to accept others. So this is what this looks like. So instead of you thinking about how you should be better for every waking moment of your day, you can instead actually rest when you need to rest, relax when you need to relax, enjoy life and be present with your family without feeling guilty. Also, you'll no longer say yes just in order to people please. Just because you can do everything, because you're a high achiever, you're a perfectionist, you think you could do it all, you'll no longer be saying yes just in order to prove how worthy you are, prove how good you are. And you'll start only saying yes to things that fill your cup, that feel good to you. And you're not doing it out of proving, you're just doing it out of I love doing this. And then you will feel like you are actually worthy of good things. I see this all the time with high achieving perfectionists, myself included. We just love to self sabotage. When things are going good, we're like, nope, I didn't do that well enough. I didn't do good enough on that presentation. I don't deserve it. And I've seen this in myself. I've seen this in my clients where we get some success, we get some good things, and then we pick apart our presentation or the way we did it or the way that we should have done it. And so, what we really want to do when this comes up is we just hold that version of ourselves and we say, thank you. Thank you for being so observant. And then you can just put that part of yourself off to the side, give it another job, have it go play golf. And then you can start observing and tapping into, but here's what I am doing well. Here's how who I am is already enough. Just me, being me, not having to do anything to earn it. And when you feel like you're worthy of good things and you don't have to prove it, from this comes more money, better relationships, better health, a better schedule because you're actually saying no to things instead of proving to everybody that you can be everywhere and do everything. You're no longer identifying with being the hard worker or the survivor. You actually can tap into thriving and inner peace because being hard on yourself is not a good long term strategy. It may have worked in the past to get you to certain goals, but it's not a good long term strategy because it's keeping you in a state of fight or flight. It's keeping you in this vibration of not feeling good enough, experiencing guilt and shame. Guilt and shame are the lowest vibrations. And again, don't have shame about your shame, okay? We're going to tap in there, we're going to be there. But you know how we fix this, right? The shame spiral is you have the courage to feel the shame and you name it. Brene Brown says shame loves to hide in the dark. It loves to keep you isolated, it loves to keep you hidden. And so this is one of the things I know that most perfectionists have a hard time reaching out for help and support. There's stigma around mental health. There's stigma around saying, hey, things aren't going as well as it looks on the outside, especially for business owners, right? We tend to be so hard on ourselves when we're like, my branding looks good, my website looks good, but things are not going well behind the scenes and I need help. And we want to say that is okay. Doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It just means you're living life, and life is 50-50. You're going to have some good seasons. You're going to have some seasons that are harder. And I'll just tell you, it feels easier when you have a coach. That has been my experience over and over again. When I know I have somebody to go to, I have a call each and every week. I can bring my emotions there and we work through them in a constructive way, right? Because some people will come to me and they're like, well, I cry all the time. And I always ask, is it productive? And the reason I say that is because sometimes our tears will take us into the shame spiral deeper if we don't have a way to pull ourselves out of it. So we always want to keep it structured so that we're not staying in that vibration for years upon years. We always want to be taking a step forward into the vision, into the thing that you want to create for this life. So this is your invitation to come to a free consultation call and bring all of yourself. Bring your shame, bring your messiness, bring whatever is going on for you. And we will open you up to a possibility that you can actually fall so deeply in love with yourself that the community that surrounds you feels changed by your presence. When you just unapologetically love yourself for exactly who you are, that inspires others. And that, just imagine a world where everyone is just being themselves, honoring their gifts, not wasting time beating themselves up, and just offering and pouring from a cup that's overflowing. That is what I think happens when we dive into this work of healing, deepening self love, deepening self acceptance, and just noticing the perfectionism pattern for what it is. It's just a pattern that wants to keep us safe. And we don't need to fight it, but we do want to reframe it.